Good morning. Happy Friday, everybody. Thank God it's Friday. I'm the Rabbinic Cynic, Rabbi Andrew Bentley, Rabbi Andrew Allen Bentley, Andrew Rabbi Dude. Just watched a TV show. It's a great series if you're a big fan of the Rolling Stones. They got this thing called Life as a Rolling Stone. It's a series. So I watched Mick Jagger and the Keith Richards one. Fascinating insights into who they really are, and if you're a music fan or a musician, you're gonna really enjoy the one on Keith Richards and his process as a guitar player. That aside, that's why I'm using that kind of American English accent, like the Steins. The Steins do that. They sing like they're from the South, but they talk like they're from Dartford, which is where they're from. Anyway, that aside. We'll talk about the Rolling Stones another time. So today is Erev Shabbat. It's the eve. It's the eve of the Jewish Sabbath, which begins at sundown. And every Friday, as you know, I use this as an opportunity. I'm wearing my kippah. If I'm using words of Torah, we wear a kippah, a yarmulke, as they say. But I like to. I've been reading. I'm a big fan of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. Not just a fan. I consider myself a student of his. Even though I had the privilege when I was in rabbinical school. He came to speak to our school, to our yeshiva in Israel, and he was at our graduation ceremony. He gave us it was Rabbi Jonathan, Lord Jonathan Sacks, probably one of the foremost intellectuals in the Jewish world and in the world of philosophy in general in the 20th and 21st century, blessed memory, passed away. And so what's interesting is so he wrote a series of books, a series of books on the weekly Torah portion. Each one had a different theme. And traditionally in the past, I've used his books. I've used many of his books to teach from, to learn from, and I find that they're wonderful. It's called Covenant and Conversation. It's a whole series. And right before he died, when he found out his leukemia was terminal, and he'd been fighting it for a number of years, it came back, and as it does, unfortunately. So he wrote his last Covenant Conversation book. And it's called On Spirituality. It was partially him reconciling the end of his life, but it was also just he worked, and if you read the foreword, he explains that this is a book that was designed to be read, to be learned together, to learn with people, and he took it all the way to this point, and unfortunately he died before he wrote the last part of this, the last Torah portion in Deuteronomy. So we have all the way up to the last one, and so they understand. So people always the forward explains that this is kind of the idea of reading the Torah, of learning the weekly Torah portion, is that and he didn't finish it because you're supposed to finish it. And so in this week I want to discuss this week's Torah portion and his take on it. It's called Eikev, and I titled this show today Art of Listening. And again, you see at the bottom here, if you listened yesterday, send your questions. I'm going to have a segment, people have questions, ask the rabbi. You got anything you want to know about Judaism, but afraid to ask, feel free to ask and like and subscribe at the same time as well. So go back to the art of listening. So this week's Torah portion, Eikev, begins with the word listen. Listen seems to be a theme throughout the book of Deuteronomy, throughout the book of Dvarim. This whole last discussion that Moses has on his before the Israelites go into the Promised Land without him, and the word "listen," as Rabbi Sacks pointed out, you see it 92 times in different forms. Most famous of which is the Shema. Hear, O Israel, our Lord our God, the Lord is one, or Adonai our God, Adonai is one. So what does that mean? What does it? And he asked that question. What does it mean to listen? Lishmoa, tishma, shma. Right? It comes in very different forms. If you read the Talmud, it has different forms in Aramaic, and shmaita is an Aramaic form that the rabbis are listening. But what does listening really mean? And so Rabbi Sacks draws this parallel. What are the two greatest influences on Western civilization? Right, there are two. Right, there's the Greek civilization, and the Hebrew civilization, the Jewish civilization, the ancient Israelite civilization, which gave birth to monotheism, which is Abrahamic monotheism. And the civilization of the Greeks gave birth to rationalism and science. The foundation of science and astronomy all comes from these from the Greek philosophy, the ancient Greeks, and also the idea of art, the idea of the observable. Right? That's one of the foundations of science, is that we observe, we look, we see, and that's how we can quantify and understand things. And so now, this is not a critique in saying that one is right and one is wrong. These are two parallel civilizations which gave birth to the civilization and the way of thinking that we have today. We have the scientific way of thinking, which takes the observable, or the artistic way of thinking, the way of looking at things, the way that we can decide if you study art, you see, there are certain elements of what makes something beautiful. Well, visually, what makes something beautiful. And what Rabbi Sacks pointed out was that within Greek society, and as we know, if you go back to thousands of years, you see there was a conflict initially between Greek society and the Israelite society, and that's what Hanukkah is all about. Really, is the Israelites the Maccabees fighting off against the influence of Hellenization within Israel, within the Jewish homeland. But to fast forward, we see that the philosophers like Maimonides started using Greek philosophy, Aristotle, for example, as a way to bring rationalism and bring that way of logical thinking into Judaism itself, which is inherent in Judaism. But what Rabbi Sacks is kind of saying when we look at the idea of listening versus seeing, listening with our ears, and it means more than one thing. It doesn't mean just hearing something superficially. It also means internalizing something. It means how we relate to each other, that we listen to truly listening, truly absorbing what someone is saying. And that's why I think Moses felt that this was one of the most important things to impart on the Israelites before they went into the land of Israel, was this idea of what it means to listen to somebody. And this is very different than looking at taking at things of how they appear. Right? We live in a society where things appear. We take things at how they look. Right? Like a pop star. Right? With the Rolling Stones, the way they look. Well, I guess they did. They were kind of hot right back in the day. Mick Jagger had this kind of suave, but it wasn't. It was much more about the music. Right? It was about what you heard. Right? How did it affect you? Before music videos, you listened to the music. It didn't matter what the person looked like. You heard it, and that reached you on a level that is not something that you could explain with. It reaches you on a level that is not observable. It's a level there's a reflective action in there. The music resonates with you in that sense when you listen. And it's the same way when you listen to people talking, you listen to what someone's saying. Ironically enough, right, science, let's go back to science. Sigmund Freud, and Rabbi Sacks brings this up. Sigmund Freud understood that the art of listening is the key to psychotherapy. It coined the word, I hear you, I really hear what you're saying. And when you go back to that, what does that mean? I really hear what you're saying. And when Sigmund Freud, as a Jew, may not have been an observant, possibly an atheist, right? I think Freud was conflicted about that. Einstein also, at the end of his life, Einstein recognized that there are things that science cannot understand, and recognized on some level the idea of a higher being or a higher intelligence to the universe. and however you look at that, right? So these are the two major figures in science in the 20th century. Einstein and Freud changed the way that, has really affected the way we look at the world today. But this idea of hearing is also an act of love, right? The Shema itself, right? V'yohavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha, right? Listen, hear God, and then it's saying, you shall love the Lord, Adonai your God, you shall love God. But it's not just talking about loving God, because what do you see it's talking about loving your fellow human being, right? Love, ahava, right? Love is an act of, listening is an act of love, right? It's an act of unconditional love. That's why they're connected. The Shema, the idea of listening, is connected to this act of love. And this is something I believe is missing from our society today, because we take things so much, there's so much visuals out there, right? What if I just covered the screen like this and I was talking, right? Maybe you still listen, I don't know. I like the visual stuff. I'm going to do more visual stuff. I'm going to make some videos that will not be live, but we look at the music video changed the way that we listened to music. It made it so that for something to go viral, right, that's you're going to make a video to kind of make the music go along with it, right? So do you necessarily think the music, if the video is really good and the music's okay, does the music really speak for yourself? That's a question. People have opinions on that. I think that they're, obviously as an entertainer, when you go out and you perform live, there's a lot of these visual elements, right? Mick Jagger talks about how he learned all these little dance steps. And someone in this interesting My Life as a Rolling Stone was Tina Turner, in fact, said, that Jagger would, in the early days, would come into their room and they didn't think he'd go very far. And he said he dances like, you see kids dancing, they hear the music, and they just move their bodies. They're just listening to it. And it doesn't really matter. They're not formal dance steps, right? They're just moving in such a way. And that's the amazingness of Mick Jagger. The beauty of Mick Jagger's dancing is that it's like that energy. Right, but it comes from the music, comes from the listening. Keith Richards, in fact, talked about that the idea, music itself, and this is someone that struggled with heroin addiction in the 70s, but it was the music. He made that choice. What's more important? Is it the music or the drugs? And he chose the music, obviously, right? Everyone thinks Keith Richards is. I think there's a lot more of the. I think there's a lot more temperate. He's a lot more temperate than we probably realize over the last 20, 30 years, because he's still here with us, thankfully. But it's music in that sense is like listening to each other, right? Saying I hear you. That when someone really feels like they're being listened to, something changes in that relationship. Something changes in a relationship between human beings when they believe that they're being listened to. And sometimes you don't listen. We all have people where people talk over each other all the time, right? That's a problem with talk radio sometimes, or you listen to the good morning, Jerry. Hi, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. When people don't truly listen to each other, or people talk over you, and you just say, you ever have those friends where they just talk and talk and talk and talk, can't get a word in edgeways, you tell them something going on with your life, they don't even hear it, right? We all have people like that, we know. But the trick is to listen, and we all do it ourselves as well, right? We want to get out what we want to say, so we just listen. We don't necessarily listen. So Rabbi Sacks here, at the end of his life, as an act of spirituality, as an act of humanity, right? This act of humanity is to learn how to listen to each other, to really hear each other, and to internalize something. When you hear something, there's a memory. It triggers memories in ourselves. It can change. There's a neurogenesis that can occur through the act of listening. It can change our own psychological profiles if we truly learn how to listen to each other, to ourselves, to what's called, this is coming up to Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and we blow the shofar, and the shofar, which I'm going to blow the shofar soon when Elul comes. I'll give you a little demo. Hopefully it won't blow the mic out. But there's this idea of the kol demama daka, the still, silent voice. There's a voice inside of us, right? This is not audible. This is not sound waves moving through the air. We will have these voices inside of us that we need to learn to listen to. And the shofar is that sound. There's a sound without words that wakens us up, that makes us listen, that makes us hear. Think about that. What does it mean to truly listen to ourselves, to listen to each other, and not take the observable or what appears beautiful may not necessarily be beautiful, and what appears ugly may in fact truly be beautiful. And so that's what I think in this Shabbat, this weekend, right? Everybody take that opportunity to listen, right? It's an act of mindfulness. Listen to your partner. Listen to your friends. Listen to people that you don't necessarily agree with. Learn to hear. Learn to truly hear, to truly internalize, right? So yeah, that's my sermon for this Shabbat. And now I'm going to move on to listening and watching, because I love watching. And I've been on this Orville trip, right? I've been loving and hating the show this year, this season. And if anyone who don't know who the Orville is, the Orville used to be what started off. It's like Star Trek meets Family Guy. Seth MacFarlane is the executive producer. He's also the captain. This season, though, it seems like a little, I don't know. Is he listening to his fans? And he talked about that on Comic-Con, how he really takes his fans seriously. He really listens. Seth MacFarlane is one of those individuals. I'm a big fan of his because I believe he truly does listen to his fans. He takes it to heart, right? It's very special in a lot of entertainers. Do you take it personally or do you say and that's the art of listening, right? And I think that he really does, because if you look at the way this season is kind of playing out, the way he was talking about it at Comic-Con, he was kind of talking about he's listening to his fans and he understands that it was a real rough start to this season. And the music, if you really want to listen, the music this season sucks so badly. It's like Attack of the Clones type music, but wasn't written by John Williams. It's like, why did Disney decide to force Seth MacFarlane, and I believe that's what they did, to have these horrible, distracting audio, dissonant musics, classical music playing all over the place, right? There's no space. And that is, but at the same time, the stories are getting better, right? We watched this week's, watched another episode, my wife and I, that talks about when is it acceptable, right? So if you watch the episode, there's a group of people called the Mocklans, right? They look like Klingons. And the Mocklans, they're an all-male society, but they do have females, and the females are considered they're shunned, right? If a female is born, that female then has to have a gender reassignment because they want to be an all-male society. Anyway, an underground network that springs up, but it really does challenge those interesting issues. Of when is it right to tolerate a society that really just treats people so badly? And in the end, if you got to watch the episode to see how they kind of played it out. But really, they did play it out in the right way, because everyone kind of really stood up and listened. They listened to this child who was forced to become a male, then because they have the technology, they can make him back into a female the way she was born. Or the way they viewed their identity, and this whole identity idea, this whole idea of listening. And I thought the Orville beautifully brought that out, beautifully explained that. And it's definitely getting better. I'd like to see them do another season. I know it's all up in the air, but it's definitely getting better. But they do need to fire the music, whoever's doing the music for it, because it's like Keith Richards said something beautiful in going back to music, right? Keith Richards said that what is music all about? And you musicians out there will kind of agree. I got a good friend of mine's a bass player, said, "See, music is it's the space between the notes." And Keith Richards said a similar thing. He said, "My canvas is silence." The canvas that he uses when he writes a song or they produce a song in the recording studio is silence, right? When you have silence, what do? You listen. And the silence is and then what you do is the canvas, right? You're filling in the white, right? You're filling in the white with color. And the color is the musical notes. And in this case of the Rolling Stones, it's these amazing riffs, right? That you hear these songs start off with these amazing riffs, and it's those silence. And if you listen to Keith Richards' guitar playing, you see that there's not a lot of notes there, right? It's just it's so sparse. And you listen to the best songs, right? They start off with one instrument, another instrument comes in, another instrument goes out. This is the art of producing, is the art of making you want to listen, right? And that's what Keith Richards was talking about. He's like, when I write a song, he starts off with this riff that he'll play for hours and hours and hours, and he'll play the same riff in different ways, but it's so sparse that it becomes interesting and it grabs you and it makes you keep listening. And that's the same way with everything, right? The silence allows you to listen. Those acts of mindfulness, right? So I'm kind of joking around about the Orville. I'm really serious. The music is really annoying in certain places because the composer didn't really understand that you sometimes just need silence. You don't have to fill in everything with notes and with arrangements and with every instrument you have at your hand, at your fingertips. That you do need the silence, the kol demama daka, the still silent voice, right? That still silent voice. So on this Erev Shabbat, on this eve of Shabbat Eikev, this is, whether you're Jewish, you're not Jewish, you're atheist, agnostic, you have no, you're whatever it is that gets you through the night, as John Lennon said, take the idea, that psychological idea, which I believe is a healing idea, of finding and hearing the voice in the silence, the space in the silence where you can hear, where you can internalize. So that's all for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And once again, if you've got any Ask the Rabbi questions, I'd love to hear your questions. You can email me at rabbibentley@gmail.com, or you could write it in the chat or in the comments section on Facebook, or go to my YouTube channel and put it in the comment section on YouTube, or just PM me, however you want to contact me. There's no difference if you're embarrassed, if you want to be anonymous. I'm not going to tell your name if you don't want me to. If you'd like me to say your name, I'll love it. That's also fine. Everything, it doesn't matter. It's all good. So once again, I hope everybody has a beautiful weekend. Whatever day you observe your Sabbath, have a beautiful Sabbath, may it be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or even Wednesday or Monday, right? Because some people's weekend are not on the weekend. And so with that, I will say, live long and prosper, and listen, listen, listen. Bye.